Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I have to recognize everybody from around the world and those who may watch after the fact. This is your girl, Marcy Thomas, founder of Brown Girl Collective, and of course, the BGC Book Club, where we come together every week, or most weeks, we come together so that we can talk about just wonderful books by, for, and about Black women. So if this is your first time here, I am coming to you from the outskirts of Atlanta. And it's just such a thrill to be with you again for another opportunity to talk about a spectacular book with a wonderful author who has many, many titles under her belt. So as you're coming in the room, you can let us know where you're joining us from if you would like, if it's your first time, if you're a fan of Ms. Allers or just anything that you want to share with us in the comments, please feel free to do that because this is an interactive experience. So for almost 4 years, we've been doing this here in this space. And as you saw in the introduction, there have been many, many wonderful Black women writers who've had the opportunity to be in this space. But the one tonight is extra, extra special. Not that the others aren't, but she's extra, extra special because she actually has written more than 80 novels. And that is Rochelle Alers, who is the best-selling author of, as I said, over 80 novels with nearly 2 million copies in print. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Golden Pen Award, Emma Award, Vivian Stevens Award for Excellence in Romance Writing, and the Zora Neale Hurston Literary Award. She's a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and lives in a charming hamlet on Long Island, New York. And I'm wearing my blue and gold because I'm actually a Sigma Gamma Rho. So we got a little sorority D9 love going on tonight. So without any further delay, let's welcome Ms. Allers to BGC Book Club. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored that you did ask me to talk to the readers, and I must say that was my second National Book Club conference. I had gone maybe a couple of years before, and the conference was good, but getting home was horrific because I was delayed in the airport for hours. My luggage was in Long Island, and I was stuck in Philly, and it's like, I don't know if I want to do this again. But when I came down this time, it's like a warm hug. It was just so wonderful. I met so many women I've communicated with over the years, and I made a lot of new friends. So, I'm looking forward to going back next year.
Absolutely. And the conference that she's referring to is the National Book Club Conference that was here in the summer in Atlanta. And that's when I had a chance to meet you and to get a copy, my advanced copy of Taking the Long Way Home, which we're going to be diving into this evening. This wonderful, epic, thick, y'all. It's thick. Novel. So yes, it was such a pleasure for me to read it. And, as I mentioned, you are a queen of the genre of romance and romantic fiction and, historical romance and all of that. So it is indeed an honor to have you here. So I guess let's just dive into it. So what was it that drew you out of all the books that you've written over time? What was it that drew you to this particular story that is shared in Take the Long Way Home?
Well, believe it or not, I came up with that proposal back in 1998, I think.
Wow.
And, I wrote the chapter by chapter outline. For some reason, I just felt I needed to write that story. And I had submitted it to my publisher, and they were very excited about it. And then something happened, and the terms and the conditions on which we had agreed kind of changed, so I took it back.
Okay.
So I said, but you know what? I'm going to hold on to it because one of these days I'll be able to write this story. And then my editor, who was leaving to go to another publishing house, had asked me, she said, I need something from you before I leave. What do you have? And I gave her the proposal. And of course, the same people remembered it to them back in 1998 or 99, and they snapped it up. And I said, now it's time. It's time. Sometimes we want things to happen when they happen, but it's not ready for it to happen. And what I like about this is that a lot of the events coincides with Black Lives Matter and a few of the other things. So, it's like generations going on and repeating themselves. So
Mhm.
I think the timing was perfect for this book.
Absolutely. So for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet, just like a synopsis of what the story is actually about, just so we can know before we kind of dive into some of the themes that you covered.
Well, it's really about a young girl coming of age during the civil rights era. She lives in Jim Crow, Mississippi, and she lives in an all-black town where um, the outside and racism really doesn't touch her. She's aware of it, but it doesn't affect her life from day to day until one day she happens upon a young white boy that has been whipped and dumped in the environs of her town. And she knows well enough that if they found a young white boy beaten up and dropped off in a black town, there are going to be repercussions. So she enlists her grandmother's aid. And you know what? Sometimes you do things and you don't realize they'll backfire on you, and it changes her life. That one incident and the events that follow change her life and change her forever. It makes her a little wary of white people, and because of his reaction to her, she's exiled from her own home and she's got to go live with an aunt. And then her life becomes a little cloistered because her family wants to protect her, but in protecting her they make her a little bit too innocent when she has to go out into the world.
Right.
But she learns to navigate. I mean, and I don't think she actually realized how strong she really was, but she came from, she's a descendant of survivors. So she has to be strong. We all have to pull on that inner strength to say, if those people who were enslaved did not survive, I wouldn't be here. And they went
That's right.
through things that, we can't even imagine, so that we could be here and do what they didn't do and couldn't do. And I think that's the theme I really wanted to put down on page, that regardless of, she had a good life, but there are also some things that really hit her hard. And there were a lot of losses for her, a lot of losses. And they come, it's like, you don't have one loss and then you have a lull. They were coming one right after the other. And you know what? And I think in the end, it did make her a very strong, a very resilient woman, to become the woman that she didn't realize she was.
Right. And that's what's so powerful about Claudia's story, because yes, she does start out as this young, somewhat innocent, somewhat naive girl, and we watch her for decades, because it starts in the 50s and it ends, pretty much in present time. So we get to see her become a seasoned, grandmother. So it was just such a powerful story to read and to just and also just from the standpoint of me being a Black woman in America, and just thinking of how the things that are going on around me have an impact even on my life. And we do see that in the way that the story is told. So was there a particular situation or person that Claudia is patterned after, or is it just all strictly from your imagination?
It's really my imagination, and it's more like the people who she encounters
Okay.
that remind me, like her aunts remind me of my aunts.
Okay.
And the thing is, her friends remind me of some of my friends, and my college friends, and friends who never went to college, but just who've been friends for a lifetime. So, but Claudia is truly a fictional character who sprang from my imagination. I just had to, I had to frame and I had to put the meat on the bones and breathe some life into her, and and then she spoke to me.
Mm-hmm. Now we talked about it before we came on live that the book is like 575 pages, something like that. But you were telling me it actually got cut down. So she was speaking to you in tremendous ways. So
Yes.
I know it was a combination of her story, but was it also the fact that you were including the history that made it the story be so expansive?
Yeah. The history is the backdrop for her life. And what the March on Washington, the college demonstrations on campus, the Vietnam War, the assassinations of the two Kennedys and Medgar Evers and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. These are events that I lived through. And some of them I witnessed. I was too young to vote, but I did go to the March on Washington. So that was an event where, and I did go to, I think, at Kennedy's funeral. So these things just stayed with me, even though I couldn't vote at that time. I wasn't old enough, but because my aunts were always a part of some social thing and social events, I got pulled in. And then that sometimes you hear grown folks that get together, they start talking, and and you really you can't participate because they stay out of grown folks' business, but
right.
you ear hustle a little bit. And I did a lot of ear hustling as a child. So I remembered my mom and them used to talk about Joe McCarthy and the commies and I grew up in on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Okay.
And in a block that was really racially and ethnically diverse. It was very strange because I lived on 98th Street between Central Park West and Columbus Avenue.
Okay.
And the next block over, 99th Street, was 99% Black.
Okay.
The block on 97th Street was a mixture of whites and maybe a few Latinos. So when I went to one school in the first grade, and then in the first grade, and then they built this new school, Emily Dickinson, PS 75, that had a very special curriculum. So they would test the children, and they would track you. And if you were in a certain track, and if they had an accelerated curriculum, and you finished it, just say by February, by March, you were already on the next grades.
Oh, wow.
Curriculum. And they took the kids from 98th Street and 97th Street and going back, but they did not take the Black kids from 99th Street. Who went to the old school. And my daughter's godmother lived on 99th Street. I didn't know this until years later when we were adults. And her education was inferior to mine. So which meant, when I mentioned in there about de facto segregation in schools in the North, she didn't have the good books. She had the old books.
Right.
And we had the new books.
Right.
So even though, schools weren't segregated, but neighborhoods were segregated. And I did not have a Black teacher from 1 through 12.
Wow.
Okay. I never had a Black teacher. I had to wait to go to college to see a Black face in the classroom, in front of my classroom. So, it made a big difference. So these are things that, when Claudia is talking to her first husband about his mother and the education he got, that's what they were talking about, de facto segregation in the North, even though schools were integrated.
Absolutely. But I do want to back up just a little bit because, she ends up there, in New York and having a northern experience. But she starts out in the South, in a little small town. As you said, it's a Black town, and you don't really she wasn't really interacting with white people as much. But she's coming up in a 2-parent household. Where both of her parents own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like she's leading somewhat of a charmed life in this small Black town in Mississippi, just having parents that are together and are working together
Mm-hmm.
and are building things. And then you mentioned her aunt. She has these two aunts who I really love, Virgie and Mavis, who are her mother's sisters, but they have lived a totally different life. So
Yes.
one of the things that I love about it is, before, the things that are happening that cause her to change, she has these different ideals or different, she can see two different sides of what womanhood could be, even
Mm-hmm.
at a very, very young age.
Yeah, because her aunts are actually her role models.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think she realized how much of an impact they have on her. But but she wants to be like her mother, who will fall in love and have children, so that she's not torn, but she has to realize there's going to come a time when she wants to marry the two. She wants to be independent and educated, like her aunts, who live by their own leave. And I like that about them. For women of that era, who
Yes.
who decide they really don't need a man, or they don't need a husband, I should say.
Right. Right.
And even though she was living in this town, they were poor, and she didn't even realize she was poor.
Mm-hmm.
See, and
Mm.
that's the whole thing, because she had a roof over her head, clothes
Right.
on her back, and food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times with black people, we don't realize we have the basics, and that's all we really need, because other
All
things
you
are just
needed.
a little extras. You have a pound cake. You don't have any icing on it, but that cake is so good. It's just so good.
Mm-hmm.
But if you decide you're gonna put a little lemon swirl on it, or a few nuts, that's the extras. But it's still a pound cake,
Yes.
and that
And
was
I have this big smile because I often say that about my own life. It's like, this is the cake. What I've got going on is the cake. Anything
uh-huh.
else that comes is the icing to add on to the cake. So that is so true. But yeah, she's just surrounded with love. And even we mentioned her briefly earlier on, her grandmother, Erlene, her dad's mom, who
Mhm.
was very integral in her life as well. So she was surrounded. She had her dad, of course, but she was surrounded by the love of all of these women who were teaching her just different things about life.
Because she felt protected. That's one
Mm,
thing, she felt protected. And even when the crises occurred, they all closed ranks.
right.
And she didn't really fall apart, because you know what? If you're living someplace and you're living with your parents, and you see your grandmama every day for 12 years, and then they send you away, that's devastating.
Yes.
That is truly devastating. But they every weekend, every Sunday, they came to see her. So
Mm-hmm.
she always had that connection with family. And that's what I wanted to really emphasize, is that strong bond with family that, some of us don't have
Right.
nowadays.
Right. That's true. Where the family really bonds together. And so
Mhm.
when the incident happens, which you'll have to read the book to find out what the incident is,
Mhm.
with the young man, Denny Clark, she ends up moving to Biloxi
Mhm.
and moving in with her aunt,
Mhm.
Mavis. And that begins a whole nother experience for her in terms of her education,
Mhm.
what she's able to learn. And then having this aunt who speaks multiple languages, which I thought was pretty spectacular, that both of her aunts spoke multiple languages. And you don't really think of, people as being at that time of
Mhm.
being like multilingual. So
Right.
how fun was it to like put at that element and then also learn the languages, or did you already know the languages?
No, some of the, you know what? I know some of the languages, but not enough. So, I had to do a lot of research, and I had to go on my little app with translations, and I try not to put too many in there.
Right.
But I just wanted her aunts to be women of the world. They were
Mm-hmm.
very worldly. But even though they lived in this, they grew up in a segregated um, environment, but they were women of the world, and she became a woman of the world through them. They were able to expose her to things that she probably never would have been able to experience if they weren't who they were at that time.
It was just good to see that. So through that, she goes on and finishes high school, gets to go overseas for her high school graduation trip. Was like, how exciting is that to be able to go to Paris?
Because you know what, a lot of young white kids, they go abroad, and that was a tradition for a certain social strata, that once the kids graduated high school, they'd go abroad for a year, or they go abroad for the summer, and then they come back to give them that experience. And that, what I think, was one of the best experiences of her life, because that was a stepping stone. Even though she was truly innocent compared to the girl that she met, to Noelle, they were like night and day. Even though they were close in age, it was night and day. So much so that the environment and what she experienced in Europe was like night and day. And I think that was the first time she actually felt free, free from the shackles of Jim Crow.
Right.
And it allowed her to see people who looked like her, but didn't have to be subservient. I mean, you looked Josephine Baker and James Baldwin and a lot of the jazz musicians, they went there and they loved it because they became citizens of the world. See, but you have to remember, they did not have, even though France and England and Spain and Portugal they colonized and enslaved other places, they didn't have it on their in their country.
Which
You
is
did
great.
not have systemic slavery in France, in Spain, in Britain. That's the difference. They went elsewhere and enslaved people, but they didn't have it in their own country.
And as I was reading the book, I'm just really thinking about that, how there were these people who were able to go over there and just have a different experience of life. I know just having, like, my grandfather or elder, uncles and stuff like that would talk about going to serve in the war, for example, and being overseas and having these experiences of, being able to be heroes and all of that, and then coming back to the States and being treated as second-class citizens. So, this is something, or continue, return to a space where they were treated like second-class citizens, I should say. And so this is something that she got a chance to see as well through her travels and all of that. So of course she goes and she comes back, and once she comes back to the United States, she has the opportunity to go to an HBCU.
Yes.
So that was pretty exciting to see that even though she had this other experience, but when it came to the education, she still was going to a HBCU, which I guess in that time frame, a lot of students would have been still going to the Black colleges.
Because a lot of people don't realize that, my aunt, she graduated from Bethune-Cookman, and she was an AKA. But when I went to high school and I was thinking about going to college in the South, just say if I wanted to go to a state school, which was, basically a white college.
Right.
Not only did I have to fill out an application, I had to send my photograph. And so even if your grades made it and the essay was excellent, when they saw that black face, we're not gonna accept you. So that's why so many Black kids did go to HBCUs. But I went to college up here in the North. So, but I just said I miss that experience, the marching bands, the sororities, and this and that. There were just so many things that part of me just longed for. But you know what? It's okay. But I was able to live vicariously through Claudia when she went to Hampton.
Yes. And then she met a young man through her roommate who ultimately becomes her first love, who's at Howard. So it's like, okay, you got the shoes in there.
Girl, I had to put it in there. I had to represent. Okay.
So
Yeah.
that was just good to, to see that and how they came together, but also in their building a relationship, it also, and throughout the book, it kind of comes up in her relationships, how even though during this era, this time frame, which is the 60s, the 60s and all the way up into the early 70s, how there were these movements of Black
Mm-hmm.
people for liberation,
Mm-hmm.
and how we had the civil rights movement, which, think of Dr. King and all those people with the nonviolence. And then you
Mm-hmm.
have people like Malcolm X, who start out saying, "Hey, by any means necessary."
I loved
Later,
him.
later
Loved.
on,
I loved
getting
his
into,
speeches.
yes, yes.
You
So I
notice
mean,
I
but
quoted him a lot.
you did,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you did. So I can gather from that that that's more of your philosophy, or that was just more so for the character, or a
Mm-hmm.
combination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because initially, I mean, I could see her becoming a little bit more militant
Mm-hmm.
than her husband because he'd been raised in the North and he didn't face the adverse or the the obvious racism that she had to face. So I could see her being a little bit more militant and pushing. And during this time, you also had the sexual revolution where
Right.
women had started, there was birth control. So they started, controlling their own bodies and their own, whether they wanted children or not. So there were a lot of things that went on during this time period, a lot of revolutions.
Mm-hmm. A
So,
lot of options. But it was just good to see, of course, the things that women were dealing with, but even understanding that, we always hear Malcolm Martin, the two different ideals, but to
mhm,
see it play out and how it could impact a family or
mhm.
relationships where you have one person who believes that people, okay, somebody's saying they just bought the book on Kindle. Yes, yes. Good deal. That's what we want.
Okay.
But yes, thank you. But the whole thing of realizing that even within families or within communities, that people would have had different ideas about what was going on. Because I've
Mhm,
often heard people say that, yeah, not every day everybody is about Dr. King, Dr. King, Dr. King, but in
mhm,
real time, that wasn't necessarily the case.
mhm. I mean, because they just did. I think it was. They just did something on Bayard Ruskin the other day. I think
Mm-hmm.
CBS This Morning.
Mm-hmm.
They did something on him, and you know what? You remember Stokely Carmichael before he changed his name, and all of these people who were involved in making changes and risking their lives. And after a
Mm-hmm.
while, they were no longer afraid anymore. You know, they marched, whether they put the dogs on them, the fire hoses or the billy clubs. And when you talk about, John Lewis and the March to Selma, after a while, they were just tired of being sick and tired, and they just weren't going to take it anymore. And and it parallels with Black Lives Matters today. It's
Right.
like history repeating itself. And during that time, it was the young people, it was the college students, it was the high school students who affected the change. And even now, it's still the younger people who are back out there because you missed a couple of generations. Now they're back out there in the streets.
Right.
And that's why I'm so happy it came out at this time, because when you
Yes.
think about it, not that much has changed.
Yeah.
A lot
That's.
has changed, but it's a subtle change.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? You will never eradicate racism.
No.
It's in the bones, the marrow. It's and it's like they keep saying it's our original sin, and you got to wash away that sin,
Mm.
But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in the future?
That's
But
so
I,
true.
I wrote it to give people things to think about, for people who lived through that time and others who didn't and didn't know about that. Because I had a few people, I had um, a woman who teaches with my uh, daughter who said, I had no idea that that was going on in the South.
Right.
And I said, really? You know, she's a white woman, a Jewish woman. She said, I just didn't know. But she said, I'm so glad I read this because it was so good. And what it'll do is make you go back and maybe look at a documentary
Right.
about, you know, that time period or the events that were happening during that time. So, you know, it's like I didn't want to beat people over the head like this is a lesson, this is a lecture, but you know, just kind of smooth it in and make it, you know, kind of subtle, and then oh, really, really, really.
Right, because I mean it's the reality of, and I think we might have touched on it before, that while we are out here living our, you know, our best Black lives, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on around us that does have an impact. That would be things that we're either having to make a decision: are we going to be a part of the fight in whatever way that fight shows up for us? Because like in the case with the character Claudia, you know, she's like, I'm going to go out and register people to vote, wherein her husband was a lawyer, so he's trying to work at it from the legal angle. And then you would have people that weren't doing, you know, quote unquote anything. So, but it just allows you to kind of see that, you know, but you're still, you know, falling in love, you're still getting married, you're still, you know, having relationships with family. All these other things are happening in the midst of us just going to work, you know, going to college, going to school, whatever, raising children. All that stuff is happening while everything else oftentimes is going crazy around us.
What I really liked was her relationship with her college roommate, Yvonne. I liked her a lot. I mean, she was truly a modern woman, and you know, she was focused, she was outspoken, and you know what, she was who she was. And the thing is, when I compare her to Noelle, it's a little bit different. And you know, and then you have Noelle, who's truly a rebel. He's a young French woman who falls in love with an African man, and you know, it's like, I'm just going to do this.
Right. At the time when that really wasn't a thing so much, even though she was not an American citizen. So of course there's that difference, but even still, you know, just to see that. So of course, you know, unfortunately something happens with Robert, and Claudia ends up being a widow. And so then she has to make other choices about, and even when she was married, just making choices about, haven't really talked about it, but she did have a career. You know, she got her degree. She was, you know, had her business degree, and she did, you know, have a job working in banking, which at the time you weren't necessarily seeing a lot of Black women or Black people in the banking field, not in the quote unquote white banks. And we see she has experiences even with that as a woman trying to get out here and have a career, and you know what her husband says about whether she should work or not work, or how long she should work, and things like that.
Well, I did work in a white bank.
Right, you did. Yeah. Oh, okay. You did personally. Okay.
Okay. I did work in a white bank. I mean, there weren't that many of us, because during that time, they were, you know, the banks where I worked, where there were a lot of Irish who worked there. There weren't that many Jewish people, and then depending on your neighborhood, they had you know, a few Blacks here and there. So you know, I saw the banking system change in front of my eyes. So yeah, so that's why I decided to put her in a bank, because you know, I'm familiar with banking. And then but you see her interaction with her Black boss. And he's, you know, he's of not another generation, but he's of another mindset.
Right.
Because of the things that were going on with the bombings, and he didn't want any part of that. And if, you know, if she's the cause, you got to go. You know? And then you had Black people like that who they just wanted the status quo. I don't want no problems. Just let me live. I'm used to this. It's okay. And
Right.
they live in it and they die in it. And
Mm-hmm.
others will say, enough. I'm not going to take it anymore.
Right. Right. That's so true. And as you were saying that, it brought to mind a friend of mine was telling me several years ago that she worked in a bank. She worked in a black owned bank.
Mm-hmm.
But she when she started working there, she may have had, a relaxer.
Mm-hmm.
Decided that she wanted to go natural. And
Mm-hmm.
and the black bank basically told her she needed to straighten her hair at the black owned bank.
Mm-hmm.
And when she did it, because she was like, okay, I want to keep my job. And
Mm-hmm.
when she walked in, they're like, okay, now you look like a professional. Like, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
black people told you that?
Yep.
But
Yep.
but
Yep.
yeah, it's the whole thing of, there's a certain idea that people may have of what it means to be professional, or
Mm-hmm.
well, it gets into the whole respectability, and that's a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation. But things like that. So, but we do see some things along that line with Claudia about how she's treated. So that just put me in the mind of that when you made that
Yeah,
comment.
because it always in the back of her mind, she's saying, if things aren't going well, is it because I'm black? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and she can't help that.
Right.
When she comes to New York and she's offered this job, and then they tell her the position's not yours now, she's saying, she's second guessing herself. Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm a black woman? She said, but they had to know that when they interviewed me. They saw me face to
Right.
face. So there's always that trepidation until she comes into her own. And it took her a while to come in. She had to go abroad and work abroad
Mm-hmm.
to come into her own, to
Mm-hmm.
know her worth.
Right, right. And, because the book does also talk about her romantic interests, Ashley Booth is a very interesting character as well, because he
Mm-hmm.
is, a black man who has a certain level of, privilege and things like that in life. And because of some of his privilege the what is he, the Prince of Wall Street,
The
or the
Black
King,
Prince of Wall
Black
Street.
Prince of Wall Street at the
Okay.
time, that he's but it's good because he's actually able to allow her, or through her relationship with him, she's able to get into some rooms that maybe she might not have otherwise. So
Mm-hmm.
he does have some value. But then we even see how that relationship plays out as well.
But Ashley was carrying a lot of personal baggage. He
Mm-hmm.
was he was he was the piece de resistance when it came to his professional career, but he was carrying a lot of emotional baggage from his past, and he hadn't resolved those issues. And if he had resolved those issues, he would have ended up with her.
Mm-hmm.
See, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole thing. And and even Yvonne said, Ashley loves Ashley. He loves Ashley more than he can't love anybody else because he loves
Right.
himself, and he did love himself.
Right.
And her that portion of the book is the shortest because of who he is, or who he
Mm-hmm.
was, that
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't drag it out anymore. So when she was, because she had fallen in love with him. It had been what, 4 or 5 years since the time she had lost her husband, and she
Right.
was ready, and he was everything she could want in a man,
Mm-hmm.
but he withheld a little bit of himself. And you know what? She just saying, if you tell me you love me, I will be here. And he couldn't do that. He
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do that.
Yeah, and I mean, there are people who deal with those situations even in the here and now. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
a person who isn't, for whatever reason, I mean, we all have baggage, because I mean, hey, we know Claudia had some baggage and some
She had
things
a
that
lot
she
of
carried.
baggage.
We all have, if I showed you my closet over there's some baggage in that closet. You know what I mean? We all have something, but it's like do we allow those things to like really keep us from being able to live the fullness of life, or do we allow those things to say, okay, yeah, that's there, and that's a part of who I, that's a part of my past, but it doesn't have to, I don't have to drag that into the future. So, and that's what was going on with Ashley, is that he was just dragging it along and missing out on good opportunities.
Yeah. But you know what? Sometimes you don't get a second chance. But
Right.
I'm not going to give away the book, but sometimes you get a second chance.
Sometimes you get a second chance.
But
But what I love about Claudia is that, between, the relationships she had with the women in her life, and, she always, no matter who the man was, really, she always would advocate for herself. She wasn't one to just lay down and be like, okay, you said this, so this is what I'm going to do. And and she kind of tells Ashley the same thing. It's like, yeah, I got this opportunity, and you can either, excuse my French, shit, or get off the pot.
Right, right.
Either you're gonna be with me or you're not, because I got this great opportunity, and I'm not going to let you stop me from having this opportunity. And this is when we see her back overseas.
Yeah, because my mom used to say, opportunity is like a bald-headed man. You got to catch it while it's coming towards you, because otherwise, if your hand slips off, he's gone. And that's how I looked at that. I said, she had the opportunity,
right?
Something she's always wanted, something that she could do, and she was definitely certified to be able to grow. And you know what? She didn't let him stop her. Right. And that's another lesson, a subtle lesson for women, because sometimes you got to do for you. And sometimes if the person is behind you, sometimes you don't have enough strength to reach back and grab you. If they're standing next to you, maybe it can happen.
Right.
But he was behind her.
Right.
And you know what? He had his. I mean, he's the Black Prince of Wall Street. Everybody knew who he was.
Right. Exactly.
But it was time. He had his, and it was time for her to get hers. And when she was presented with the opportunity, she took it. And that's another level of her growth.
Right.
As a woman, and as a Black woman, and as an American, willing to make that change, because that is traumatic. To leave the country of your birth and everything you've known and your people, to go somewhere to start over, that's not easy.
It isn't. But, just looking at, the trajectory of her life, that time she spent with her aunts, and really being immersed in languages and things like that, because she didn't necessarily learn. She did not learn that from going to school. This is something she learned from her family, and being able to have conversations in French, Italian, and Spanish, and write letters to her friends in the different languages. So it was those things that she was learning outside of even a formal education, which allowed her to move ahead. And that's just actually, even right now, as I'm saying that, that's something that's just so important, that we oftentimes tie up our ability to do or to learn or to grow into something that's formalized, but sometimes that's not the case. There are a lot of ways that we can learn lessons that will allow us to be able to, do whatever it is that we want to do in life. And that was something, that she was able to do, which I loved, not just the degree, but those other things that allowed her to be a part of this international banking, empire, which is wonderful.
And Mavis was really rough on her.
Her aunt.
Yeah, her aunt Mavis, because Mavis saw the potential. And she was saying, Claudia's smart, but she should just do enough to get by. That's why she would tutor her in those languages, because she said, you never know when you're going to need them. Even though Mavis didn't teach those languages, but when she went abroad, she became a citizen of the world because she could communicate. But the thing is, she, sometimes when Claudia would just mess up, she would punish her, because she knew she saw in this girl what she did not see in herself at that age. And in the end, it was the best thing for her. It was the best thing for her.
Yes, and I love when she gets to go back to, oh, not back to, but when she gets to go to Italy, to Rome, to work for the bank, and she
Mm-hmm.
reconnects with someone she had met in France like 10 years before that, and it was just good to see that because, well, a couple things is that for her as a Black woman to have a different experience of even what it means to find love and maybe not find it in the way that she thought that she was going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
It was good to be able to see that, and to have someone that like truly adored her, you
He
know.
adored her. He did
Hmm.
adore her. And I liked his mother.
Oh, yes.
I liked his mother, and and what his mother had to sacrifice and give up for love.
Hmm.
Because many times you sacrifice when it comes to love, and you hope that the sacrifice is worth it. And for his mother, the sacrifice was worth it.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
liked the way she became Claudia's mom in
Right,
every sense of the word.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that was good. Giancarlo is his name, the
Yeah.
character's name. But just to see, how that all played out and they, came together and, ultimately had a family. This isn't saying too much, but they ultimately had their own family and,
Mm-hmm.
worked together in different ways and supported one another. And he was a supportive husband, because that's another thing that
Mm-hmm.
comes up, for me in reading, and may come up for others in reading, that, yes, having love and having a partner is great, but making sure that you have the partner that's good for you, not just
Mm-hmm.
good to you, because there is a
Mm-hmm.
difference.
Yeah, I think he was good for her
Hmm.
in many ways that Robert couldn't be because of Robert's age and his
Hmm.
inexperience.
Hmm.
So, this man is 12 years older than this woman, and he's worldly, and he's wealthy, and he he didn't have anything. He didn't have struggles. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So, he had interpersonal relationships with his parents and things like that. But he had a charmed life.
Hmm.
So when she, even when she met him when she was 18, he still was living a charmed life, and it was
Hmm.
very different. So, um, it's not that she loved Robin any less, but it was a
Right.
different type of love. It was a more mature love once
Hmm.
she reconnected with Giancarlo.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's something to see as well, because we see, basically 70 years of this woman's life. We see love, we see loss. We see her having opportunities to, pivot and adjust, and it's the real things that we experience.
Hmm.
Every a person's life doesn't always have to be a straight line from point A to point B to
Right.
point, whatever. We see all of these different things, and how she has to, at different times grapple with things about how she really even wants to show up in the world. So I really liked seeing that, and, seeing someone's whole life, because oftentimes, in a book, you might see, it might be a 2 or 3 year time period or whatever, but because this is an entire life and she is the center of the entire book,
Hmm.
there's so much that we get to see, and, for me to be able to glean lessons from as well.
Definitely.
Yes. So now the title, Take the Long Way Home. What is it that you made you choose this as the title for the book?
Well,
Or
I
what?
my editor actually chose that
Okay.
title. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We
Okay.
went around the block a couple of times, and then they finally said, "Take the long way home." And I said, "You know what? That is very appropriate because she does come back, and then you have to ask yourself, where is home?
Right.
Is it Freedom, Mississippi? Is it New York City, or is it Rome, Italy? Where is home? And all
Mm-hmm.
of them are home.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, where she spent the most years and had the most experience was in Italy. When you compare it to, because she spent what, she was in her late 20s and she was already 80, so she spent almost 50 years. And even when she comes back, she said it's been 50 years since I've set foot on American soil. She said if I didn't come back now, I would never come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so many things had changed.
Right.
And when she didn't realize a lot of things, things had changed, but she also had changed.
Right. 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 And I do know nowadays, in this present day, we are seeing more women and men making that choice to say, hey, I'm going to go someplace else and live, especially now with some of the economies that we have that you can, work from anywhere. So it's good to have a story like this to see someone who did that and made that choice, a long time ago, and kind of set the stage for others who might want to do something similar now. And actually her aunt in the book, who was like what, in her 100 or whatever,
yeah
still living outside of the US. So it is
because
something.
she was truly an expatriate. She left the States, went to France to tutor French kids in English, and never came back. Well, she came back for her sister's funerals, but and even when when Virgie got older, she said, "Come live with me." She didn't want to leave France.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Right.
And Rome and Paris aren't that far apart when it comes to travel. So she would go to see her a lot, and she would have made sure she was taken care of. But she was, and then after a while, even Mavis went to live with Virgie. So those sisters was something.
Yeah, I love seeing that. Kind of put me in even though the lifestyle is different, it made me think of like the Delaney sisters.
Yes, definitely.
Who lived, up in age, but they lived their own lives and were professional women, and did their own thing. So it's good to see that. And I mean, and it's not to say, it's not disparaging, the women who choose not to live that type of life, but I guess it just shows you that there's more than one way to be a woman and have a fulfilling life, and it doesn't always have to center around whether or not you are a wife or a mother. There are a lot of different ways to have a good and fulfilling life, and I that's one of the things that I took away from Take the Long Way Home, is that there's more than one way to have a good life. And if you want to have the love and the relationship in the family, you can do that and still have some of the other things that you might want in terms of career or being able to travel and move about the world with a certain level of autonomy to do those things, even in the context of relationships. So that's really good.
Because even maybe said she didn't begrudge her sister for getting married and having children and and becoming a wife. She says, but that wasn't for her. She said, because what, she knew she had that wanderlust where I need to travel. And what, if I had a child, I would resent this child because it's holding me back. So, people have to come to grips to know, they have to get to know themselves and know who they are. And just because society dictates that, you reach a certain age, you should be married, you should have kids. I have a lot of friends who never married and never had any children and lived wonderful lives. Okay.
That's me. Okay?
People don't realize you have choices.
Yes.
I mean, if you choose to embark, you have an affair, fine, but that's your choice. And your life it's fulfilling, and then you have some women who are married and I can't stand when he comes home. I never heard all this grumbling. I'm so sick of him and these damn kids, they're working my last nerve, and it's like, is that really life? But that's what you've chosen. Right. And you don't realize we do have choices.
We have freedom of choice.
And people forget when God created man, he gave him free will.
Yes.
This is what you can't do, but what everything else you can do. And he chose to do what he shouldn't have done. Okay. And that's what happens even with a lot of young people. Your actions have consequences. If you go out there and you rob somebody or you mug somebody, the consequences are you have a criminal record. You may not be able to get a job where you're bonded and this and that. It's like a domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even with Claudia, she made certain choices. Maybe some weren't the best.
Mm-hmm.
And you could probably say if she hadn't stopped to help this little helpless white boy who was filled with hate, her life
Mm-hmm.
would have she never would have left freedom,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
But he was the catalyst to
Absolutely.
move her life along a certain path
Mm-hmm.
that she had to take to become the woman that she became at the end of the book.
And I love that you just said that, because sometimes I think that a person or people can get so caught up in the bad thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's not good that the bad thing happened, but sometimes, like in the case of this book specifically, there are, like you just said, there are these other things that happened. Yeah, this thing that happened at the beginning wasn't so great. And yeah, she had to do something that maybe she would not have wanted to do, but it just opened up something completely, totally different for
Mm-hmm.
her. So sometimes I think just being able to take a step back and say, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best situation when it happened, but there are all these other things that have been good that have
Mm-hmm.
come on the other side of that
Mm-hmm.
thing that maybe wasn't the best. Because I can think of some things like that in my own life, and I'm not going to talk about them right here.
And what I really wanted to do was show a comparison. There were
Yes.
4 men, 2
Yes.
white and 2 black.
Yes.
And the difference between the 2 white men was like night and day.
True.
When you look at somebody and he's a poor kid who'd been abused, and the result was, a lot of self-hatred and didn't realize why he was so angry. But he had been abused. And then you get Giancarlo who grew up privileged and loved and adored. So, he just knew who he was because he truly was the shit. Okay. And then you have Robert, who is sensitive, and just emotional and just an all around good guy. But he didn't really have the intestinal fortitude to be stronger than he should have been.
Right.
He grew up without Jim Crow hitting him in the face, but yet he wasn't as strong. And I think it happened later on when he became
Right.
a little bit more militant.
Mm-hmm.
But if he would have lived longer, I think he would have grown to
Right.
be a very strong man. And then you have Ashley, who again is the flip side of Giancarlo.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up with professional parents and he's a better born, better bred, had everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then he had a few little issues that he never worked through, and he should have been on somebody's couch to work through those
Right.
issues. As
Right.
intelligent as he was, as gorgeous as he was, and as flamboyant as he was, he had this little kernel that ate at him, and he couldn't let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Those are your parents. That's their life. Let it go. But he couldn't.
Right.
So,
Right. So it's good to see that, and just her interactions with all of them. Because that's real, as we live and we interact with others, we have to deal a lot of times with their stuff, and how does their stuff potentially change us, and do, like in Claudia's case, do we have the strength to still, stand in who we are and not allow whatever is going on with the other person change who we are. So there's a lot. So there's a reason why this book has a lot of pages.
The thing is, Claudia loved Ashley, but she loved herself more.
Yes.
And many times in relationships, we love somebody else more than we love ourselves.
Never good.
And the thing is, she was her aunts would tell her, don't forget, you are a descendant of survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever comes, you will make it. You will survive. And that was in the back of her head when
Mm-hmm.
she had to face certain situations that,
Mm-hmm.
I just can't lose it. I can't fall apart.
Right.
I mean, even when she lost her mother and she had just given birth to a child, it's like she's going through postpartum. And,
Right.
a lot of women would have lost it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a grandmother, a dad, a mom, and she's 6,000 miles away from her mother. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how much more can this poor woman take?
It was a lot. It
Yeah.
was a lot. It was a lot.
But she
So,
had a supportive husband and a very supportive mother-in-law. And that I
mm,
think that's what saved her. And
mm-hmm.
the fact that I gave her a child, which meant I gotta survive because this child depends on me.
Right. Right.
That's why I gave her that baby at that time.
At that time. Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, and every choice you made, it was definitely strategic,
Yes.
in the storytelling. Because yeah, and then think of the thing of, when there's a loss, usually there's a loss of life. Usually there is a new life or something
Hmm.
new that comes on the heels of a loss. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's good stuff, everybody. So I know Carla said she went and bought it on the Kindle. Everybody else, please, go grab copies of this book. It's been out for a little over a week now, or right
It
at
came
a week.
out last Tuesday.
Yeah, just tomorrow will be a week. So
Hmm.
it has not been out long at all. And so for those who might be on the lookout for it, actually I do have it's called the Brown Girl Collective Bookstore. That
Hmm.
if you go there, it's affiliated through the bookshop website. So
Right.
the book is there. So if you go there and take a look, if you want to pick up a copy, of course, a local bookseller or wherever you buy your books, but that's just an option. And
Okay.
it helps to support the work that I'm doing here as well for that. So I really do suggest that you pick it up, or even listen on the Audible, which is what I did. I did a combination of both. I did some of it reading and some of it I actually listened, just so I could make sure I got a chance to read the entire story. So are there any particular events or anything that you have coming up, Rochelle, where people can be on the lookout for you or anything like that, so they can come get a signed copy or whatever the case may be?
No, because you know what? This past summer, every other weekend, I was on the
Um,
road.
okay.
I was in Chicago, and then 2 weeks later, I was in Columbus, Ohio, and then 2 weeks later, I had come down to Atlanta.
Atlanta. Okay.
So I was like, I was spent, and the thing is, I was on deadline, and I was
Mm.
dragging my laptop, and every chance I got, I was typing, and it's like it was like double strength and stress. And so I said, you know what, I just got to take a break. I don't think I have anything. I've done this is my second Zoom in a couple of weeks. I have no, this is my third. So I'm doing more, Zoom meetings. Um, I'm scheduled to go on a cruise in 2025. So,
Oh wow. Okay.
2024 right now is like open, and I would love it to be open so I can just sit back and write and read.
Okay.
I have to try to catch up on my reading.
I do understand that. Well, when you say right, because I also know that oftentimes by the time you have something come out, you're already working on something else.
Mhm.
So, is there another book that we can be on the lookout for
Yes, I'm
next
right now. I'm
year?
doing another historical fiction based on the Negro Baseball League. That's the
Mm,
backdrop. You
okay.
know, um, I mean, there's just so much talk about. Um, I think I was reading where they want to bring all of the players from the Negro leagues into the National Major League Baseball Hall of Fame.
As they probably should.
Of
Hmm.
course they should. I mean, they've been kind of trickling them in and dropping them in over the years, but that whole Negro League should be already into the Hall of
Hmm.
Fame for
Hmm.
the Major League Baseball, because a lot of those players were better than the white ones, better than
That
Babe
part.
Ruth, Ty Cobb, Ted Williams, the whole giddy up. So,
Mhm.
so that's what I'm doing now because, I am a baseball fan and I'm
Okay.
going to take it up until Jackie Robinson integrates Major League Baseball.
Oh,
So it's
that
going to
should be
start like in 1930, 1935. And I'm going to take this young kid who's very smart. And, he's in, I think, in a little rural area of Tennessee, coal mining. And he doesn't want to, he's smart enough not to go into the mines. And he could have gone to college, but he's an incredible hitter.
all right.
And the scouts come and they see him and I've made up a fictional team, the Memphis Eagles. So he's going to be a hitter for them, and his life. And they do barnstorming and they go from city to city. And during that time, a lot of black players were playing winter ball in Cuba, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Venezuela.
Well,
Some of
that
them
makes
even went to Japan. You
mm,
see a lot of Japanese baseball players in major leagues now, but black players went to Japan and started them playing baseball. So, and then I take him through, because he's only 18. I take him through the Second World War. He goes to fight, but by the time in 1947, he's injured, so he can't even be drafted into Major League Baseball. But the loves, the lives, the loves, the people he meets, the women he meets, some of their there's a lot of little scandals and stuff like that. So
right.
yeah, so that's what I'm doing now, because it's really it starts now where the girl is the great granddaughter of this baseball player. Her father played in the major leagues. He's now an announcer,
All right.
and she's talking to her grandfather because she wants to do sports, but she's working for this newspaper and they got her on political and some social stuff. But she knows sports, she knows stats. So she walks out of the job. She says, I'm done. I'm done. And she calls her grandfather. She says, I know you always used to talk to me about your dad in the Negro League. She said, I think I'm going to write a book about it. He says, you know what? I found my dad's journals because he wrote
Oh.
everything down. She
Mm-hmm.
said, really? She says, I'm coming down to Nashville and I'm going to read them. And when she reads them, she realizes, I can't write. It can't be an autobiography or a biography. I got to change these names.
Okay. All right.
So
Well, that's
that's what you see is like, it's like just the pose between noun and then I do the flashbacks based
good.
on his journals.
Well, that's
And it's like, okay,
all right.
granddaddy
Well,
was
we're on
something.
the lookout for that. Sure. So definitely be on the lookout for that. As you were talking, it made me think about, there was a play that I saw last year or the year before, I can't remember now, about Toni Stone, one of the few women that were actually in the league, so in the Negro League. So yeah, that should be pretty good. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much, Rochelle. I do
Thank,
appreciate you for being here,
thank you
and
for having me. I
yes,
love you.
yes, I love you too, and I'll be ready for the next one, so we can have
Yeah,
another
I have
conversation.
to finish that because I'm writing it now, and I got to try to get in by next week.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because it's coming out. It'll come out probably next fall or
Okay.
late
Okay.
next summer. Whenever they decide they're going to do the pub date.
Well, that sounds good. So, well, I'm gonna let you get to it. I have like a couple of announcements just to let people know what's coming up, actually for the rest of the year, because day after tomorrow is November, so we're getting
Yes, it
down to the
is.
end of the year.
Yes, it is.
So I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening, or if you just want to stay in the background and watch and see who's coming next, you could do that too. But yeah, just hold on for me for a second, and thank you
Okay.
again so much for being
And
here.
thank you for having me. I really
Absolutely.
enjoyed it.
All right. So yes, that was a wonderful conversation with Rochelle. As we said, we met back during the summer, and it was great to have a chance to sit and talk with someone who has so many wonderful titles under her belt, with even more to come. So just to let you know, I'm just going to run them off. Well, who's here for the rest of 2023, so you can know who to be on the lookout for. So starting next week, we will have Kiana Alexander who'll be here to talk about her book, Carolina Built. So that is next week. And then the following week, Tanisha C. Ford will be here to talk about Our Secret Society, which is based on the real story of Molly Moon and the glamour, money, and power behind the civil rights movement. So we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks. Then someone else I met at the National Book Club Conference, that is Phyllis R. Dixon. She will be here to talk about her book, Intermission. And let me see, someone that was here earlier this year, actually a set of twins, Amber and Danielle Brown, will be here to talk about Perfect Little Lives at the beginning of December. And then the last actual book club conversation for the year will be Crystal Smith Paul with Did You Hear About Kitty Carr? So those are all of the books that are coming up. And then just like last year, at the very end, I want to say maybe the second or third week in December, we will kind of do a recap of the year and where we honor our winner's circle, which are the people that you will get a chance to vote on for like your favorite books of the year in a variety of genres, your favorite book club interview that we've done here and things like that. So I'll be putting that out soon so we can start voting. So that's what the rest of 2023 looks like. And believe it or not, I've already started scheduling people for 2024. So we're going to continue to be in this wonderful book space where we're sharing with beautiful, bold, brilliant, and beautiful Black women writers who are telling stories that center us. So thank you to everyone who's here, who's watching live. If you're catching on a replay, please go ahead and share it out and buy a copy of the book, read it, and reach out to Rochelle after you've read it, because authors definitely like to know how their work resonates with you. And also make sure that you leave your reviews and all that on the different spaces where you can do that as well. So that's all I've got for tonight. And I look forward to seeing everyone again starting next week. Begin to finish out the year. Thanks again for everything, and we will talk again real soon. Take good care. Bye-bye.